We left Ohio at first light, with fog still hanging over the highway. Mara sat in the passenger seat, face buried in her phone, occasionally showing me photos of the place we'd rented for 2 months. An old farmhouse in the Appalachians, surrounded by trees, $300 a month. For me, it was a chance to finish my dissertation in peace. For her, an escape from the city and a toxic relationship that ended a month ago. The radio was low. I kept flipping stations, catching a signal from one county, then another. On one frequency, a newsreader mentioned missing people in West Virginia, ongoing searches for the Collins family, possible links to similar cases in Kentucky and Tennessee. Mara winced. Change it. Too depressing. I found a music station, 70s tracks, static crackling between songs. Mara leaned back and closed her eyes. We wound through mountain roads, switchbacks between hills buried in thick forest. The leaves had already started to turn, even though there was still a week left before the end of October. The air smelled like rain and rotting wood. The house wasn't easy to find. The road signs were old, sun-faded. Some were missing altogether. I pulled over twice, trying to match the map on my phone, but the signal died in the depths of the trees. Eventually, we found the turn, a narrow dirt road slipping between pines. Branches scraped the roof. The road twisted, dipped, climbed. 10 minutes later, we saw the house. It stood in a small clearing, trees closing in on all sides. 2 stories, a tilted porch, paint peeling. The roof looked sound, the windows intact, the door solid. Beside it, an old shed half swallowed by ivy. Behind the house, the forest thickened, dark, impenetrable. The owner said the nearest neighbor lived a mile away, but we never saw anyone the whole time we were there. The first days were quiet. We unpacked, set up rooms, learned the weight of silence. I claimed a small room upstairs for a study, desk, laptop, books. Mara chose the room that faced east. She said she loved waking with the sun, though I knew she often stayed up until 3 a.m., scrolling her feed. On the 3rd night, I noticed them for the first time. It was around 9 p.m. I was at my desk working on a chapter when Mara called from her room. Her voice sounded off, tight, strained. I got up and went to her. She was standing at the window, staring into the dark. "Look there." I walked over and squinted into the yard. At first, nothing. Just the black wall of trees. Then I saw them. 3 figures at the edge of the clearing, maybe 100 feet from the house. Motionless, tall, thin, their outlines blurred by the night. Something white on their faces, masks, paper, homemade, roughly cut. Even from a distance, the eye holes looked crooked. Who were they? I didn't know. Maybe local kids? Halloween was a week away. Maybe it was a prank, but there was something wrong about the way they stood so still. No shifting, no whispering, just watching the house. I went downstairs and flipped on the porch light. The figures didn't move. I came back up and watched from the window for another 10 minutes. Then, slowly, very slowly, they turned and slipped back into the trees, one after another, a few seconds apart, like they were following a ritual. Mara was shaken. I tried to calm her, said it was just a joke. People get bored out here. She nodded, but her eyes were tight with fear. That night, I lay awake for a long time, listening to the trees creak, the wind slide past the siding, a distant owl. The next evening, they came back. This time there were more of them. 7, maybe 8. I didn't count exactly. Again, they stood at the tree line in those same masks, silent, unmoving. I stepped onto the porch and shouted, asked what they wanted. Nothing. No reaction. They just stood there. I stayed on the porch for 5 minutes, then went back inside and locked the door. Mara was pale, curled on the couch with her arms around her knees. I sat next to her, put an arm around her shoulders, told her I'd drive into town tomorrow and ask around. Maybe it was some custom, some local thing we didn't know about. She nodded, but the fear didn't leave her face. I didn't sleep again that night. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, a faint creak on the porch steps. I froze, listening. A long pause. Then footsteps receded. I went to the window and looked out. At the edge of the yard, a single figure stood in a mask, watching the house. Then it slowly turned and disappeared into the dark. In the morning, I drove 20 miles into town along a broken road, past abandoned farms and overgrown fields. The town was small, one main street, a few shops, a gas station, a diner. I went into the grocery store and bought supplies. Behind the counter stood an older woman with a tired face and gray hair pulled into a tight bun. I described the house we'd rented and asked if she knew who lived nearby. She shook her head. Not many left out that way. The young moved on, the old passed. Maybe a couple of farmers still hanging on, but they're far from you. I forced myself to ask about the people in masks. The woman frowned, studied me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. You saw them. It wasn't a question. Who are they? She didn't answer at first. She turned away, stocking shelves, avoiding my eyes. Then she said quietly, "Leave. Find another place." I pressed, asked if they were dangerous, what they wanted. She shook her head. "I can't say, but if they came to you, it means you've been chosen. Leave while you still can." She refused to say more. I walked out with a cold knot in my stomach. At the diner, I tried talking to the waitress. She just shrugged and said she didn't know anything about masks, but her eyes were lying. I got back to the house near evening. Mara was in the kitchen making dinner. I told her about the conversations in town. She went pale but tried to hold it together. Said maybe we really should leave. I agreed, but said we'd stick it out for a few more days. Maybe it was a prank, and once Halloween passed, it would stop. That night, they came back. This time, there were more than a dozen. They formed a half circle around the house, standing maybe 70 feet away. I turned off the lights so they couldn't see us, and we watched them from the dark. An hour, 2, 3. They didn't move. They just stood there. Around 4 a.m., they slowly turned and walked back into the woods. Mara didn't sleep at all. In the morning, there were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook as she poured coffee. I told her we'd leave in 2 days, as soon as I finished the chapter. She nodded, but I could see she was at her limit. The next day passed in strained silence. Mara barely left her room. I tried to work, but my thoughts kept circling back to those masked figures. Who were they? What did they want? Why just stand and watch? That evening, I noticed something odd. In the kitchen, the jar of flour was slightly open, even though I was sure I'd sealed it that morning. The salt wasn't where I'd left it. Small things, easy to blame on forgetfulness, but something in me tightened. I checked every window, every door, everything was locked. No signs of a break-in, but the feeling stayed, like someone had been inside while we were gone. That night, Mara screamed. I jolted out of bed and ran to her room. She was sitting up, shaking, staring at the window. I flipped on the light and rushed to her. She pointed a trembling finger at the glass. Someone was right there, at the window, in a mask. I saw him. I looked. Outside. Only darkness. I stepped closer, focusing my eyes. At the edge of the clearing, barely visible in the moonlight. Figures, a lot of them. Maybe 20. They had formed a full circle around the house. Mara was crying. I held her and told her it would be okay. That in the morning, we'd leave. We wouldn't wait. She pressed into me, whispering nonsense, breath hitching. I tucked her back in and sat beside the bed. After about an hour, she finally drifted off, restless, twitching, murmuring, fists clenched in her sleep. I stayed there until dawn. Outside, the figures stood until first light. Then, slowly, they broke apart and slipped back into the trees. That day, I started packing. Mara barely helped. She sat on the couch, staring at a single spot on the wall. She looked pale, drained. I realized she'd lost weight in just a few days. Her eyes were sunken. Her skin had gone gray. I asked if she felt sick. She shook her head, just tired, not sleeping. By evening, most of our things were boxed. I decided we'd leave at sunrise, before they could come back. Mara agreed, but there was something distant in her eyes, like she wasn't fully there. That night, the thing happened that convinced me we needed to run. Now. I woke to a cold draft. I stood up and saw my bedroom door was ajar. I was certain I'd closed it. I stepped into the hallway. Mara's door opened too. I looked inside. The bed was empty. My heart dropped. I ran downstairs to the front door, unlatched, wide open. I burst onto the porch, barefoot in pajamas. In the weak moonlight across the clearing, I saw them. Dozens of masked figures standing in a half circle, and in the center, with her back to me, Mara. I shouted her name and ran. The figures didn't move. They just watched. I grabbed Mara by the shoulders and turned her toward me. Her eyes were open, but empty, unseeing. She was in a trance, or asleep, or something else. I pulled her toward the house. She walked, but mechanically, like a doll. The figures never moved, only observed. I dragged Mara inside, slammed the door, locked every bolt, sat her on the couch, shook her shoulders, called her name again and again. She finally blinked, looked at me. Recognition slowly returned.
"What am I doing here?" she whispered. "You went outside," I said. "You were with them." She shook her head. Her eyes widened with terror.
I was sleeping. I don't remember anything. We spent the rest of the night on the couch, pressed together. Every light in the house was on. Outside the windows, the figures stood, still, silent, patient. At first light, they left. We packed the rest in 30 minutes. I loaded the car and helped Mara into the passenger seat. She was sluggish, almost apathetic. I turned the key and drove off the clearing. The first 20 miles passed in silence. I pushed the gas, dodging potholes, snaking along narrow roads. Mara stared out the window, saying nothing. I kept checking the rear view. Empty road. Then I saw them. Figures in the road. 3 masked people standing right on the asphalt. I hit the brakes, veered onto the shoulder, and passed them. They didn't move, just turned their heads toward us, following the car with their gaze. 10 miles later, 2 more. At the bend, 3 more. They were everywhere, not trying to stop us, not chasing the car, just standing, watching as we drove by. Mara saw them and flinched. They're everywhere. I tightened my grip on the wheel and kept going. We reached the gas station, the same one where I'd bought groceries. We needed fuel. The tank was nearly empty. I pulled up to the pump and got out. "Come with me," I said. Mara shook her head. "I'll sit here. I'm just tired." I hesitated, then went inside to pay. The same older woman was behind the counter. She looked at me for a long moment, but said nothing. I paid and hurried back. 3 masked figures stood by our car. They had surrounded the passenger door. Mara sat inside. The window was cracked open. She was talking to them, quietly, almost a whisper. I couldn't make out the words. I shouted and ran. The figures began to back away, slowly, very slowly. No rush, no running, just a measured retreat step by step. I yanked the door open and grabbed Mara's hand. "What were you doing? What did you say to them?" She looked at me with empty eyes. "I didn't talk. I don't remember." I slid behind the wheel and started the engine. The figures stood at the edge of the lot, watching. The station's guard, an older man in a greasy jacket, stepped out of his booth and stared at me, puzzled. "Are you okay?" the guard asked. "You don't see them? There, by the edge, people in masks." He glanced over, frowned. "There's no one there." I didn't argue. I just drove, foot hard on the gas. In the rear view, the figures stood motionless, then slowly dissolved between the parked cars. We drove another 30 miles without stopping. Mara was silent. I could see her trembling, even though the car was warm. By evening, we reached a motel, a small roadside place with a dozen rooms and a flickering neon sign. I booked a room for the night. Tomorrow, we'd make it to my cousin Dana's place in Tennessee, safe there. The room was clean but old. 2 beds, a TV, a tiny bathroom. Mara curled up on one bed immediately. I turned on the TV, found some movie, tried to distract myself, but my mind kept circling back to the figures. Who were they? What did they want from us? Why Mara? Around 10 p.m., I stepped outside for air. The lot sat under weak lamps, a few cars. Quiet. I leaned against the wall and watched the road. Then I saw the first figure, standing at the edge of the lot, just beyond the light. Then a second, a third, a fourth. They stepped out of the dark like they were forming from the air. 6 masked people on the asphalt, staring at our room. I rushed back inside, locked the door, slid the chain, shook Mara awake. They're here. We have to go, now. She stood without a word. We grabbed our bags, slipped out through the back, circled the building, reached the car. I started the engine and pulled onto the highway. In the rear view, 6 figures stood in the lot, still watching. We drove through the night. No stops, only pay at the pump fuel, never lingering. Mara slept in broken bursts, twitching, murmuring. By morning, we crossed into Tennessee. 50 miles to Dana's. No figures on the last stretch. The road felt normal, ordinary, like none of it had ever happened. Hope crept in. Maybe we'd shaken them. Maybe it was over. Dana met us at the door. My cousin. We didn't see each other often, but she'd said yes without hesitation. She looked at Mara and frowned. What happened to her? She looked sick. Long story, I said. I'll explain. She didn't press. She showed us the rooms, said we could stay as long as we needed. Mara went straight to bed. I sat in the kitchen, drinking the coffee Dana brewed, and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Worry flickered in her eyes. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I've heard about things like this. Not here, but in other places. People talk about cults, groups that live in the mountains. They hunt the isolated, the outsiders. No one knows exactly what they do, but people go missing. I felt the cold settle in. So it was real, not a hallucination, not paranoia, a real threat. Over the next few days, Mara started to come back to herself. She ate more, slept more. The dark circles faded. She started smiling, talking. I let myself relax, thought the worst was behind us. But 10 days after we arrived, I woke in the middle of the night to a faint sound from Mara's room. I got up, went to her door, and cracked it open. Mara stood at the window, motionless, staring into the yard, arms hanging at her sides. I touched her shoulder. What are you doing? She turned slowly and looked at me. There was something off in her eyes, distance, emptiness. Just watching. Watching what? Them. I snapped my head toward the glass. The yard was empty, no one, just trees, lawn, the fence. There's no one there, I said. She smiled, slow, strange. You just don't see them. She went back to bed, lay down, closed her eyes. I stood at the window for 10 more minutes, searching the dark. Nothing, but the unease wouldn't leave. The next day, I found dry leaves on her windowsill, old brown, curled. I asked Dana if she'd opened the window. She shook her head, said the windows in that room hadn't been opened for a week. It was too cold outside. I asked Mara where the leaves came from. She shrugged, didn't know, maybe the wind, but the window had been shut. Another week passed, and the thing happened that finally broke my hope of peace. Deep night. Around 3 a.m., I couldn't sleep. Lay there, listening to the quiet. Then a sound, soft, rhythmic, paper rustling, scissors scraping. I got up and stepped into the hall. Light leaked from under Mara's door. I opened it quietly and looked in. Mara sat at the desk with her back to me. Sheets of paper, scissors, glue. She was cutting, focused, methodical. I came closer and looked over her shoulder. She was making a mask, rough, handmade like theirs, cutting eye slits, gluing the edges. What are you doing? She turned slowly and looked at me. No surprise, no fear, only calm. Making one for you. You'll need it soon. A cold sweat broke over me. I grabbed her wrist and shook her. Mara, what's happening to you? What are you saying? She kept staring with that empty gaze, then smiled, slow and thin. They're coming for us. They always come. You can't run from them. I let go and stepped back. Something flickered outside the window. I spun to the glass and rushed over. On the lawn beyond the fence, figures. 5 masked people, motionless, staring at the window, staring at me. I screamed. Dana ran in, hit the light. I pointed at the window, shouting that they were there, that they'd found us. Dana went to the glass and looked out. There's no one there. I looked again. The lawn was empty, no one. But I had seen them. I knew I had. I turned back to Mara.
She lay in bed, tucked under the blanket, eyes closed, breathing steady, as if she had been asleep the whole time. The mask lay on the table, white, with crooked eye slits, roughly glued. Dana walked me back to my room, handed me an anxiety pill, told me it was stress and I needed rest. But it wasn't stress, it was real. In the morning, I woke late and went downstairs. Dana was in the kitchen making breakfast. Where's Mara? She's still asleep. I checked an hour ago, out cold. I went upstairs and opened Mara's door. The bed was made. Her things were gone. The window stood wide open. I screamed her name and ran to the sill. Below, an empty lawn, no movement, no sound. Mara was gone. Dana called the police. 2 officers arrived, searched the room, asked questions. I told them everything, the farmhouse in the Appalachians, the masked people, the pursuit, Mara's strange behavior. They listened and took notes, but the doubt in their eyes was plain. They found the mask on the table and bagged it as evidence. One officer asked if Mara used drugs, if she had any history of mental illness. I shook my head. Before this, she was fine. The search lasted 3 days. They combed the area, spoke to neighbors. No one had seen anything. No one had heard a thing. Mara had vanished into the air. On the 4th day, after another round of questions at the station, I went back to my room and sat on the bed, face in my hands. Then a smell. Old paper and something else. Earth, rotting leaves. I looked up. On the nightstand beside the bed lay a mask. White, with crooked eye slits. Exactly like the one Mara had made. I didn't touch it. I called Dana and showed her. She went pale. We phoned the police again. They came, took the mask, checked every lock and window. Everything was secure. No one could have gotten in. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the bed, back to the wall, eyes on the door. Around 3 a.m., a sound, the faint creak of floorboards in the hall. Slow steps. Careful. They came closer to my door. Stopped. A long pause. I didn't breathe, clutching the kitchen knife in my hand. Then the steps moved away, down the stairs. Silence. I stayed like that until dawn. When light came, I went downstairs. Dana was asleep in her room. I checked every door, every window, still locked. But on the kitchen table lay dry leaves, dozens, hundreds, covering the entire surface. Old, brown, curled. A month later, a short notice appeared in the local paper. Just a few paragraphs on page 3. 2 young women missing in Carter County, Tennessee. Sisters, Mara Campbell, 24, and Emily Campbell, 28. Last seen at the home of Dana Miller, where they were staying temporarily. Both disappeared at night, leaving all their belongings behind. Homemade paper masks were found on their beds. Police ask anyone with information about suspicious activity that night to contact the local department. The investigation is ongoing. Thanks for watching.